Hello.
Hello.
How's everyone?
Hey, how you doing?
Hey.
I guess I'm gonna host this. We'll give it a few minutes for folks to join. Please add anything to the agenda if you're.
Did you get permissions on the file, James?
Joe just sent me a message if I'm going to go, so I'm gonna see if I can pull this off. I don't know if I have to put a host key in or where to actually put that in.
I don't know. With this camera quality, I think it's best not to have a camera. I'm in the car, by the way.
Yeah, I was wondering that.
Claim host. There it is.
Do we know how many people are coming?
It might be just us. I don't know.
Okay.
So yeah, I think we're my side. I'm not waiting anyone from my side.
Yeah, I think Joe's out. David is at GopherCon. So we can maybe make it pretty quick. Let's see. We'll wait for Angel to come back and then we'll get started.
Perfect.
Sorry.
Oh, Sven.
All right. So, there's Sven. Let him join. We'll get started.
Hi.
Hello.
Well, hey, we're gonna get started. Welcome. This is the Run WASI and Containerd by them Shims office hours. It is September 26th, 2023. And we are abiding by the CNCF Code of Conduct. The video is recording. If you have any questions or concerns about any of that, please let myself or any of the leads know. And we ask that you use the raise the hand feature, and if you have anything to add to the agenda, go ahead and add it. Also, make sure you add yourself to the attendees. I don't think I can accept anything on the document right now. So we might just have to mention it if you have anything. So go ahead. Does anybody have any announcements or anything they want to talk about? Otherwise, we do have 2 agenda items. No, okay. So the first one that I brought up, I just wanted to bring up the OCI artifacts and just do a quick update. I've got the PR ready in Run WASI, and I merged a change in Containerd last night that lets us be able to support these. So thanks then for oh, am I sharing my screen? I'm not. Let me
No, you're not.
let me share the screen so that we can all see the same thing. Okay, cool. Yeah, so so I've got this PR and it's ready to go. I initially was doing some things in Containerd that was going to require maybe a release, but rethought it and was able to make a really small change into Containerd that allows containers to start even if they have OCI artifact layers that are different from the container layers, which means that we can do some extra work behind the scenes and load it. So the PR here, what it does is if you mark a container with a label of OCI, let me find the README. The one change I made from previous is that if you pass a, where is it? If you pass a label here, then it will identify it as a WASM OCI artifact, and it will go and get the layers and then preload those layers and hand them off to the runtime. And in Kubernetes, through the CRY API, if you put a label on the spec, or if you build your container with a label, then it will automatically get passed all the way through, and everything kind of works. And so that's what this PR does. And I've got it for all three of the runtimes supported. So please take a look. Right now, I added an additional Docker file, which will build the latest Containerd so that we can run the end-to-end tests against something that works. But I'm going to open up the backports today to get them into 1.7 and 1.6. I was talking with Brian, and he thought we could probably get that merged all the way back. So, any questions or comments?
Sure, a comment. I didn't know that this would be possible, but it is awesome. So thank you. I very much appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for pushing me to make it even better. So I appreciate that.
I saw at some point that you added a new method that returns like preloaded layers or preloaded artifacts.
Mm-hmm.
How does that work? How can we identify a given artifact to a component? Is there going to be only one artifact ever, or can we have multiple artifacts? How do we distinguish them?
Yeah, so do you mean if there's multiple components in an artifact?
Yes, or I can think also like in Spin, for instance, there's a spin.toml that could also be part of the of an artifact, right?
Yes, so that's my next step, is to go and work in the Containerd shims and see if I can get Spin working. The idea would be that there would be that extra layer, and the runtime would know how to handle that that layer themselves. Like we can do the component layers, but the runtime itself would have to know how to use that layer, and we would just pass it off to the runtime.
Okay.
Regarding the Spin artifacts, I was talking to Fermion, and they are basically okay in changing their format slightly. That would not be a big issue.
Yeah. The other option for like the config.
Sorry, because it's called the method is called preloaded module and returns a blob, right?
Right now, yes.
Yeah. So that is assuming that there's only one blessed module. So there's only one artifact that is uniquely identified as the module, right?
That's how it's built right now. I was thinking that we'll probably need to change that to like like, here's the layers, like a list of layers that would,
Okay.
Mhm.
But that is going to be a follow-up PR or something like that.
That's kind of my thought.
Awesome.
Yep. Yeah, this is just the initial support. I mean, it's I'd like to get something out there so somebody could try it without having to be on it. But yeah, there's going to be some changes that probably need to come. In particular, once we add component, like right now, I'm assuming it's a module, so we're on preview 1 of WASM, and so the so there's only one module, but when we go to components, we'll need to have multiple components. But we should be able to query and just walk down through the list of components and pull those off and read them from the content store.
This sounds great. Sounds awesome. I'm seeing that there's still not any Windows support for this, right?
That's correct. Yeah, I actually have to fix something up in the Containerd client. It doesn't support Windows right now, which I found out when I was doing this step. Yep.
That's fine. But it's setting the way for future Windows support.
Yes. Yep. My idea there is, as you know, we're gonna have to maybe start up a second process, and so we have to preload the memory for that process and hand it off to the process. That's the idea of how I'm thinking about approaching it on the Windows side for this.
Okay. Yeah, we can discuss that when we come to it.
So one question, by the way, it's amazing, like to see the WASM modules and components as a first-class citizen on the Containerd API, basically as workloads that you can run independently. I have a question regarding the support for arbitrary, let's say, files. So, but we were mentioning before about the spin configuration. Is this something that will apply only to configuration files, or is it something that you think that at some point, not for the specific PR, I mean, thinking more in the future, that we will have the ability to compose the SOCI artifacts based on modules or any other files together?
Yeah, so I think David Justice was talking with some of the folks who are doing the work and everything. And one of the major questions he had was around, like, how do we take, if you have a website and you have like a static file that you want to serve locally.
Exactly.
And the idea that the module team had, like the folks that are working on the component support, is that you'd have like a virtual file system. So you would have you'd wrap that file in a component that would have a virtual file system, and that file would be in there. And so then it would just be another component. So everything is components at that point.
Okay.
Yeah. So from the discussion with David, that virtual file system could even apply some logic. If you're trying to access a given folder, then you go through the virtual file system. Otherwise, you fall back to the WASI preview 1 file system, for instance. Or
So
not, and you return an error, depending what level of access you want to grant.
But that virtual file system, who will provide that? It will be kind of a separate module that will contain information, or it's something that you can actually have a file system backing it.
The way we have a component, which is the entry component, or like the main component, there will be another component, which is the one that provides the file system API. And then when you link them together, then you get a module that you can run that has the virtual file system.
Okay, yeah. So basically the files, the static files in this case that we were talking about, the website will be stored inside a module which contains the virtual file system. But it will be another WebAssembly component which contains the information there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And then I think
we should visit how the implications of that. I guess that means that the content of the file system would be living in memory rather than on disk. And I don't know if like that's acceptable. Like if you want to have a file that's many gigabytes, probably memory is not great.
Yeah, I'm thinking now on the use case of, for example, storing third-dying machine learning models inside, so you can load that information. I mean, you still have currently the limitation of 4 GB because of the way that the memory is managed in WebAssembly. So yeah, having that in memory will limit the ability to use bigger models in that. I don't know if that's a use case actually we want to cover. This is something that we can discuss in the future, but yeah, I'm just thinking on those kind of use cases.
I guess in that use case, and also if you're handling big files, we could have the virtual file system fallbacks to the real file system in some situation. But then that would introduce the question of how do we handle that on Windows again? Things are different in Windows, right? But I guess we can try to solve that when we come to that.
And I think like volumes would still work in this scenario. So you could map a volume into the container for an actual like part of the file system, and you could expose that into the WASM component or the WASM runtime. Is that right?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
So volumes would be through that API that we were discussing last time for file systems in Windows, right?
I don't know, not even through like, no, I'm just saying like if you submit a pod spec like with a WASM module and say I want this volume, and in the pod spec you're going to get that volume mapped into the root file system of that container.
Oh, wait. So the way that currently works, the volume gets mounted in the root file system of the container,
right?
But then the virtual file system will have to provide a fallback so that you get access to that volume.
Right.
Because the virtual file system could say, I'm an empty file system, and then you don't have anything, right? Anything that you do to the container, you don't have access to it. So we should see how that works in the future.
Yes.
By the way, sorry if the question is kind of trivial because I didn't follow like all the different conversations around this topic. But when you mentioned this virtual file system, who is providing that? I mean, is the developer which is creating the application that needs to prepare the main module or the main component which we have the application data or whatever, and then we have a separate component, but that must be provided by the same developer, or is something that this virtual file system will come as a feature from the runtimes that we are using? So let me rephrase it. If I'm developing an application and I have my main component, which is the logic of the application, and I want to add data to that, like static files, should I build that virtual file system component, or can I rely on something else, like what you were mentioning, like volumes that I can mount the static files inside, and automatically it will take a virtual file system implementation, mount my volume, and do all the stuff for me?
So that's something that we still have to define. One of the discussions we were having is like we could create a custom Docker file builder. So when you add a new file to the Docker file, instead of being added as a layer in the final image, it's added into the virtual file system. So then at the end of if you're building a WebAssembly image for a container, then every time you add a file, it's not being added into the file system, root file system layer, but it's added into this virtual file system. That would be an option, but I think we're far from there.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think like you would have a component that said, I depend on another component that provides a file system. And so then, you know, anybody could potentially write one. You could write one yourself, or, you know, the runtime could provide that for you, or, you know, there might be a component that Docker builds for you when you're doing a Docker file thing, like was just mentioned. So I think like you're going to be specifying against like a file system API, and then whatever's underneath, you don't necessarily, you're not supposed to care, right?
Okay.
You probably
Okay.
care based on performance and your particular use cases, but it could just be a pass through. It could be to something that's in memory. It could be something that reaches out and grabs something off of, a blob storage somewhere. And you wouldn't necessarily know that because you're just using the API from your module that says write to disk or read to disk.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I think these are all the things we'll have to solve as we move towards this model. So you're definitely thinking the right direction. Cool. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, my only comment is that when you start working on the container the Wasm Shims repo, like working on an application framework like Spring, if you can just keep us in the loop for Wasm Worker Server, so we keep an eye and see how that matches with the model and can try to provide support for that too.
Cool. Are you in the is yours in that project as well, or are you somewhere else? Okay, cool. I'll see it then. So the other one, which I guess maybe we don't need to do a whole lot of talking about, was this Precious crash and hang if you pass the invalid entry point. Jorge, you did some digging on this. Do you want to give a quick summary? And
yeah, when we do the validation step, that happens before. We give control of the process to libcontainer. Libcontainer creates a new intermediate process, and then that creates another process that becomes the init process. That init process at some point does the validation check, and if that validation check fails, it kills the process. If that doesn't fail, then it does some more communication with the parent process, and then it runs the main container. What happens is that when that validation fails, that process gets killed, and some communication channels get closed before finishing the container. And what happens at that point is that there's a conditional variable that is not being set or is never been notified. And there's in our shim code, there's some piece of code that's waiting on that condition variable to be set. Yeah, basically we hang. So it's always a bit tricky working with conditional variables, and because you have to mix match them with a mutex and things like that. So refactor the code a bit. It would be easier to reason about it. Hopefully we should avoid that kind of bugs now and in the future. So if that I in the next comment. That's where it's the thread is waiting. And there's two different sets of conditional variables that I realized that when I was looking today. There's one that we set at the instance level, which is called exit code, and then somehow that exit code gets converted into this status code. Yeah, we just have to find where that notification is not happening. So I don't know how much of a priority this is. How many people are going to be entering the wrong entry point? I mean, yeah, it's a bug. It's not nice, and we should fix it. I haven't given it like priority because it's been there for a while, and It's just been reported now.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, the only reason I ran into it was because I was doing the OCI stuff where it's not actually in the container anymore. And so I missed a step where I was skipping the validation. And it was, for whatever reason, it was getting 30 seconds. Like it would take 30, 40 seconds for it to report back this message. When I run it in Kubernetes, it reports back immediately, which is interesting. I also wondering why we get this message and not like the validation message that we pass to it. Somewhere that seems to be getting lost.
I'm not sure why we get this message, but that message is consistent to what RunC reports. So if you provide the wrong entry point to something running RunC, it's the same or a very similar message. And it could be that to get the correct error message, you have to look into the containerd logs, and that's the error message that gets printed in the command line. But there's more logging happening in containerd. Also, it's it's interesting because at least for me, the first time I ran it with the wrong entry point, it returns immediately with that message. And it's the second time I run it that it takes a very long time to error out.
I don't know what's going on there.
Because the first time it hits that error and there's a dangling process that stays alive because of that condition variable. And then the second time I run it, I guess there's a named conflict or something, and it takes a long time for something to time out.
Cool. Well, thanks for looking into that and discussing it. I guess we'll fix it in time here.
Yeah, I started looking into it. But I'm not sure I'm going to have too much bandwidth to work on this in the coming days.
No problem. All right. Anything else?
Not from my side.
All right, then we can wrap up. Thanks for joining, everyone. And we'll see you out on Slack.
Thank you for hosting, James.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a good day.
See ya.